Welcome to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. I am Adam Rank. That is Marcus Grant. Kimmy Chex will be joining us here momentarily. But Marcus, how you living the day after Halloween?
It's good. You know, I actually got to go out and kind of be semi-social, like socially distant, obviously, wearing a mask and all that good stuff. But it was nice to get outside, get some sunshine, and kind of recharge before we get to this Sunday.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and it's going to be a big Sunday. And if you have any questions as we head in to Week 8, be sure to tweet us at NFL Fantasy. And, of course, our pal Michael F. Florio is on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NFL. He is answering as many questions as possible before we allow him onto the show. Look how intense he is. Like, that is a man who is – don't smile, Mike. Don't smile. Don't smile. This is serious business. We need you locked in, and we need you focused because people have a lot of questions this week. So he'll be joining the show later on. And, of course, one of the reasons why you might have a number of questions is because there's a couple of teams on a bye, pertinent teams as well. The Washington FT, the Arizona Cardinals, if you have Kyler Murray or DeAndre Hopkins or Christian Kirk, they're on a bye. The Jags are on a bye, as well as the Houston Texans. So that takes away Deshaun Watson. And that's it. Now, Will Fuller, of course, has been playing really well this season. Now, I just had to replace Will Fuller with Scotty Miller, and my heart broke a little bit. But we do have some other sleepers that can help you out later on during the week. But, check this out, too. There's a lot of wind going on. Marcus, it's November 1st, so weather is starting to take its hold here. Can we see that, the weather situations that's going on here in the NFL this week, or I can just sit here and talk to you about it? All right, well, let's say there's a board when we're talking about all the weather. There's three. The Raiders are a dome team now. So the Raiders, the Vikings, the Saints will be making the trek outside. For the Saints, this will be their first game outdoors this season. Their 2 road games were in domes. So, Marcus, when you look at this, is there any situation where you're now starting to reconsider some of your roster situations?
I think where you really can reconsider are the guys that you consider to be deep threats, right? And I know with the Raiders in particular, we had talked about Henry Ruggs. I know you were big on him. I can certainly see a situation where he could make some plays, but he is the deep threat. And when you have wins that significant, it's going to be hard to throw the ball downfield. Anything that gets some air underneath it is going to be in trouble. So a guy like Henry Ruggs, for instance, might not be a great play just because it's going to be tough for Derek Carr to get him the ball downfield.
Yeah, and you're throwing me under the bus because I liked Henry Ruggs earlier this week. That's fine. I'll wear that.
I cop to it as well.
It's fine. No, I understand, but I agree. And so that's one of the reasons why I had to make that switch. Again, Scotty Miller is my go-to. Like, all right, I'll take you out, Henry Ruggs. I'm going to go with Scotty Miller in that situation. But those are deep sleepers. Let's talk about some of our starts of the week, guys that we can feel excellent about moving into Week 8. Marcus, who do you have?
I've got Kareem Hunt, and maybe it's even greater now because of that win we were talking about in Cleveland. I mean, Hunt has been very good all year long. Even when Nick Chubb was there, Kareem Hunt was still putting up solid fantasy numbers. Now that Chubb has been injured, Hunt has taken an even bigger role in this offense. We know what he can do as a pass catcher. He's been excellent running the football as well. The Raiders' run defense is one of the worst in the league, and as I mentioned, because of that win, the Browns may really emphasize trying to run the football, so it could be a big day for Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, and if you were looking at Baker Mayfield as a sleeper this week, this might be an opportunity to go and look at somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo, for instance, who has a great matchup. One of the players, though, that I consider the start of the week is Davante Adams. And again, they were listed there in that weather game, but it's the Green Bay Packers. I wouldn't even sweat that one at all. But Davante Adams returned last week and had a monster game. Aaron Rodgers is playing fantastic as well. He is the QB7 on the season, averaging close to 23 fantasy points per game. The Packers offense is it's prolific. And it's so weird that when Davante Adams is there, he's the only one outside of Aaron Jones we'll talk about him in a moment. He's the only one who benefits. Like we saw a little bit when Davante Adams was out, they were like, okay, Robert Tonyan, you can have a couple of tugs here and we'll get some other guys involved. But once Davante Adams returned, it's like when my daughter does this with her friends. Like, there's a group situation, she's hanging out with everybody, but she has one best friend, Leona. And whenever Leona's there, that's the only one she plays with. She won't play with anybody else. So that's what Aaron Rodgers does with Davante Adams. Because it's unfortunate because I have Robert Tonyan and I need a tight end. So now I got to go fishing through the waiver wire. But enough about that. Let's look at some of the notable actives and inactives because I know that's what you came here for this week. Who's starting? Who's out? Dalvin Cook is going to be active, so that is great news. But there are some significant injuries, including Aaron Jones for the Green Bay Packers. And, of course, I have my screen set up in such a way of all the names cut off. There it is. Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Jamison Crowder's inactive, Julian Edelman, and, of course, Michael Thomas in a pivotal game against the Chicago Bears on the road. You know that Drew Brees is not going to want a lot of air yards this week. So let's talk about this, Marcus. With Joe Mixon out, with Aaron Jones both out, like, who are our top running back fill-ins? Obviously, we have Giovanni Bernard. We have Jamal Adams. Which player do you favor?
I'm gonna go Jamal Williams in this one. I think he gets a slightly better look, and I like Gio. I'm starting Gio in a couple of places, but I think Jamal Williams is set up for a big day. Played really well last week against the Houston Texans when Aaron Jones was out, and that one too. The Viking run defense continues to struggle, so I expect big things. And look, again, the wind being a factor maybe in Green Bay could help Jamal Williams a little bit, get him some of those short, easy targets to catch the football as well. So I think he's in line for a big day.
He did get some targets last week, and I was hoping, though, with Aaron Jones out, that when they get near the goal line, they might start using some of those targets to go to Robert Tonyan. I'm really trying to make Robert Tonyan a thing. I do, though. I do really like Giovanni Bernard this week. Again, with the weather situation, being what it is, I really like the production. And to me, I was the mayor of Jacksonville, Lenny Curry, hit us up earlier this morning having this very same question of who to go with. I had this slight lean for Giovanni Bernard. I think that when he's given an opportunity, he could be something exceptional. And I think with the way they spread the ball around in Cincinnati, that could actually work to his benefit because you've got so many receivers now that you got to cover. And I know that they've brought in, the Titans are getting Adoree Jackson back this week, which should help them in the slot with Tyler Boyd. But I still think this is a pretty good opportunity. I think this is going to end up being one of the higher scoring games of the weekend. The Bengals aren't afraid to put the ball up into the air. They love Giovanni Bernard. It was to the consternation of people who owned the other RB1 that they would always go to Gio a little bit too much, but I think now as a solo act, I love him there. We also saw on that board that Mark Ingram is injured. So which one of these running backs in this Baltimore Ravens backfield do you trust more, Marcus? Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins?
I'm leaning toward Gus Edwards. And look, I say this, look, on the NFL Fantasy Football Show on Friday, Michael F. Florio had a whole great list of stats and reasonings why J.K. Dobbins might be the guy. I mean, he's getting the work down near the goal line. He's getting more targets. He's, about equal snaps with Gus Edwards. All of that is great. All that is true. But something just says to me that Gus Edwards is going to be the guy this week who gets maybe not the most opportunities, but I think does the most with his opportunities. He seems to be a guy who can pop a big play every once in a while, can break off a long run. And I think that's going to be the key against a good Steelers defense. So while all the numbers might favor J.K. Dobbins, this is kind of a gut play and just feeling like somehow Gus Edwards is going to be the guy to shine.
Yeah, and at some point, you just have to realize you like what you like, and you're not going to change anybody's mind. It's like when people try to make me not enjoy the movie San Andreas. Well, you're barking up the wrong tree, because I love that movie, and I'm going to continue to watch it. Similarly, the Ravens feel the same way about Gus Edwards. So until I see J.K. Dobbins break out, and I'm certainly not going to do it against the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I think that's going to be a situation I'm probably just not going to deal with. All right, we're going to move on right now as we come back to camera, as we come back, because I don't know if we have a sponsor animation, Marcus, that I got to sit here and make sure that I hit perfectly, but it's time now for 15 for 15 presented by Geico, as we'll be talking about some of our favorite starts at every position, and because it's Sunday Fun Day. There it is, Zach. Thank you so much. Let's go with the quarterback positions. We'll look at my stardom board for the week. Carson Wentz, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, I think is now just automatic. I know a lot of people were scared about Josh Allen, but I feel no hesitation. And Joe Burrow in a game that I feel is going to be high scoring. But Marcus, why don't you go off menu? I've given you 5 good ones. Can you give us an additional one right here?
Right, I'm going to go in sort of order, the triple, if you will. And I'm going to go Aaron Rodgers in this one. And I know we showed the board earlier about the wind conditions and what it might be like at Lambeau Field this week. But I still think Rodgers has enough ways to get the football out to his guys. And maybe he doesn't throw these long throws to Devontae Adams. Maybe it's more underneath and they let Adams kind of work with the football in his hands. Maybe this means more to Jamal Williams. Maybe this gets your guy Robert Tonyan involved a little bit as well.
Maybe.
But whatever. The Vikings secondary has not been great this year. Rodgers carved them up in week 1, and I think he'll do the same again today.
No, I absolutely agree with that. That's why I would think that they're a top stack this weekend as well. Let's go to the running back position if we could and start talking about some of the big plays at there. And of course, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I've got there at number 1. I will tell you this right now, just to get this out of the way. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a RB1, RB2 to me. Le'Veon Bell is a flex. I think that you should start him. I'm not starting him over Kareem Hunt or Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara. So don't show up on Monday morning or Sunday evening. Hey, thanks for telling me to start Le'Veon Bell over Alvin Kamara. I'm not saying that at all. He's a flex play at best. But some other good starts: Kareem Hunt, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor. Who do you got, Marcus? Who do you like?
Well, it's Dalvin Cook, and so don't start Le'Veon Bell over Dalvin Cook either, because he's back and he's going to be a heavy workload guy for the Vikings today against the Packer run defense that has been shredded most of the year. So I think for the Vikings, if they want to try to stay close in this game, they want to keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. That means trying to establish the run, trying to get Dalvin Cook going. So I think he's going to have a pretty good day today, because if he doesn't, that means the Vikings are really going to be in trouble in this one.
No, I agree with you. And that reminds me, I have Mike Boone started somewhere in a lineup, anticipating that he wasn't going to be able to go. I'm really struggling with some of my teams here this week. Let's take a look at some of the starting wideouts. Tyler Boyd. Again, Adoree Jackson is back, but I still believe that Tyler Boyd is somewhat matchup proof. Travis Fulgham, even with Jalen Reagor returning. Brandon Ayuk's got a great matchup against the Seattle Seahawks with Debo out. Mike Evans. I'm going to go with Mike Evans. I'm not afraid. Marquise Hollywood Brown is there, and of course Henry Ruggs. His value to me takes a little bit of a hit, obviously, because of the weather situation in Cleveland with the wind. It's going to be too tough. I pivoted to Scotty Miller. What about Nelson Aguilar, Marcus? Would you stick with him this week?
I would stick with him just because I think they have other ways to get him the ball. I mean, he's going downfield like you see in this video right here, but they could also get him underneath and sort of let him do, just some yards after the catch sort of things. And the Browns secondary has had its issues, and they're lining Aguilar up all over the place and letting him do a lot of different things. So I think the matchup is still good. And as long as we're not expecting Derek Carr to hit him, 20 yards downfield, I think he can be fine.
That felt like a slight, but I'm gonna allow it. We don't allow Derek Carr slander on this program. But anyways, let's take a look right now at the tight end position. Obviously, George Kittle and Travis Kelce. You don't need to be told about that. But we got Noah Fant on the board. Jimmy Graham in a revenge game. There's me trying to speak Robert Tonyan into existence. I have Richard Rodgers on this board, and I do want to let you know that Dallas Goedert is back this week, but the Eagles run enough 11 personnel that I'm still fine with it. I'm still fine with going Richard Rodgers in a desperate situation, which I feel you probably are, because you've resorted to Richard Rodgers, so it's understandable. Jonnu Smith should be pretty good against the Cincinnati Bengals. And that, my friends, that was 15 for 15 presented by Geico. Now coming up, the Steelers ate up Lamar last year. He had just over 11 fantasy points, 3 interceptions. How worried should you be about starting him today? We're going to find out next as we break down that matchup between the Ravens and the Steelers. And there is Tua Tagovailoa, the lefty, as a fellow lefty. It is refreshing to see another southpaw out there. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Last election, millions of voters were unable to cast their ballots. Why? No game plan. Join the NFL family by making your game plan today and making your voice heard this November. Visit NFL.com/votes to learn more. There he is, Joey Burrow, getting warmed up there in Cincinnati. Big contest against the Tennessee Titans, who've given up a lot of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers this season. And quarterbacks, I guess the two would go hand in hand. Good start for me. I've got him as my QB10. Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day. I am Adam Rank. That is Kimmy Checks, Marcus Grant. Kimmy, how you doing? Doing good?
I'm good. Happy Sunday, guys. Happy week 8. How are you?
We're wonderful. We're happy to have you here, and the fans are happy to have you here as well because we're going to answer some of their tweets. And if we can go ahead and check that out. By the way, before that, make sure to send your questions to @NFL Fantasy. Also, want to let everybody know, too, Michael F. Florio is on YouTube answering the questions. So, Kimmy, why don't you start us off here? What standard scoring, are you going to go with Robert Woods or Justin Jefferson?
Ooh, I'm going to do Bobby Trees on this one just because he doesn't have to split as much time. So, Bobby Trees for me, even though I love Justin Jefferson as a start this week.
All right, next question coming to us from Bobby. Should you go with Tom Brady or Joe Burrow this week? Marcus, which way are you leaning?
That's a tough call. I think I'm going to go with Joey B, though, this week, just because I think they're going to have to throw the football a little bit more. I do think, in a pinch, the Buccaneers can turn to the run game against the Giants. So I'm going to go with the young guy on this one.
All right, love it. Love the confidence in Joey B. And Eli wants to know, Carson for the ceiling or Latavius Murray for the floor? You know what? I'm actually going to go with Latavius Murray in this contest. The one way that you can attack the Chicago Bears is on the ground, and with the wind swirling as it is, no Michael Thomas. Bad weather, the Saints' first time outdoors this season. I'm going to go with Latavius Murray. Or as you said, we're going to go with the floor. Now, again, if you have any other questions, be sure to hit us up at NFL Fantasy. And, of course, Michael F. Florio is on YouTube, youtube.com/NFL Michael F. Florio, answering all the questions. And one of the biggest ones that we're getting this week is Lamar Jackson going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year struggled in his only meeting with the team, 3 interceptions. He had just over 11 fantasy points. And I'm going to ask you where you think he is going to land this week. I have him right there where he was last season, right around 11 fantasy points. So, Kim, what about you? Where do you think that he's going to land this week?
I could see him getting somewhere around 14 fantasy points. I know it's kind of disappointing because you look at where Lamar Jackson was taken in most drafts. This was the first, second, maybe you were lucky if he dropped to the third quarterback taken off the board. But he's finished outside of a top 15 quarterback in the last 3 of 5 games this season. And he's not finished as a top 5 quarterback since week 1. So I know, again, this is a really tough matchup. So 14 is all I see in store for Lamar Jackson today.
Well, I think I'm going to be a little more optimistic, and I'm going to give him 18 points here because we are still waiting for that big breakout Lamar Jackson game, and I don't know that 18 counts as a huge breakout game, but maybe against the Steelers defense it does. I also love the fact that he still does have that rushing floor, and I think what's missing from this Ravens offense is the fact that I don't think we've seen Lamar run the ball as much or as effectively as he did last season, so this could be the way to kickstart him. Also, I think some big throws coming to Marquise Hollywood Brown in this one could help out as well, so I'm gonna be optimistic, and I'm going to give him 18 points.
Yeah, he did have 70 rushing yards against them last season, which is a big reason why he even got to 11 fantasy points. So you could be onto something there, Marcus. I should probably readjust it and give him a little bit more deference and respect. Somebody else we should be respecting as well is Josh Allen, who started off this season as one of the best, if not the best, fantasy football quarterback. Struggled recently, but now he's got the New England Patriots in a pivotal game, not only for fantasy enthusiasts, but also for the future of the AFC East. So, Marcus, how do you feel about Josh Allen today?
I think he's going to bounce back, and I know we've been saying it the last couple of weeks. We thought it was going to happen against the Jets, and he was just okay. But I have a feeling that this is the week he really bounces back because, one, the Patriots defense just is not the same group that we're used to seeing. I mean, we talked about the number of opt-outs they had, and even Stephon Gilmore has had some struggles on occasion this season. So I think that's part of it. The other part is that just from a football standpoint, this is a big opportunity for the Bills. And I don't think, a loss for the Patriots necessarily seals their fate in terms of not making the playoffs, but it really does put a big dent in their chances to kind of keep on top of the AFC East. So this is a big game for the Bills in a lot of respects.
Okay, but you guys are saying, oh, it's not the same Patriots defense. But you guys, in terms of fantasy football and shutting down opposing quarterbacks, they're allowing the fourth fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. So yes, I'm hoping that Josh Allen has a huge bounce back game, and I understand there were some opt-outs on the defensive side of the ball for the Patriots, but it's still the Patriots. And do you guys not know Bill Belichick? He's so embarrassed that they lost and that their defense gave up all of those points last week. They are absolutely going to try to shut Josh Allen and all of his receivers down as best as they can. So I have shares of Josh Allen. I'm starting him in a league because I really don't have anyone else who's better than him, but I really think we should temper our expectations.
Yeah, it is one of those situations where we always feel like the Bills are there and they're going to make that step, but have they ever? And that is the one thing that always keeps me coming back. But I'm a big believer in Josh Allen, so I'm gonna buy into the narrative. I'm the guy watching the movie like, no, this guy's gonna make it, and then the Scorpion King wipes him out or whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's move down to Miami though, because we've got Jared Goff, and I gotta say this. I know that a lot of people will look at this game and be like, Rams, East Coast, 10 a.m. game, their clock. That's when the Rams are actually at their best. They're averaging over 30 points per game on the East Coast in that early window. So who is a better option this week, Jared Goff or Tua Tagovailoa? And Kimmy, why don't you take this one?
Ooh, okay, you guys, it's Tua's first start. I was so excited when I saw all the pregame photos of him walking into the stadium because you root for this guy. Now, we all argued we didn't know if this was the right time in the season to put Tua in over Fitzmagic because Fitzmagic was a top 15 fantasy quarterback in 5 of 6 games. But let me focus on the question at hand. Tua Tagovailoa is going to be incredible. And if we were contemplating who is going to be the better sleeper quarterback this week, I'm going to rock with the young guy and go with the rookie on this one just because of his ability to rush and also run the ball. That's no shade on Jared Goff. I do think this is going to be a really tough matchup. Tua is going to be going hand-to-hand with Aaron Donald, who's going to try his best to shut him down. But because of that rushing ability and all the adrenaline of him having his first NFL career start, I'm going to rock with Tua.
I think it's Tua time as well. I think for the Rams, this is a matchup where they're going to be run heavy. And they've been run heavy all year long, and this is another opportunity for them, I think, to run the ball effectively. The Dolphins have struggled to stop opposing running backs so far this season, so I expect we're going to see a lot of Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown. Maybe we even get some Cam Akers finally for once in our lives. I have no idea. But I think that's going to be the game plan for the Rams. I think on the other side, it's going to be about Tua having to throw the football. I expect a couple of touchdowns. I do expect maybe an interception in there as well. But I think when it comes to fantasy points, Tua will have the edge over Jared Goff by the end of the day.
Yeah, and I was talking about how the Rams score a lot of points on the East Coast, but I'm with both of you, all of you. Both of you. I like Tua in this game. Like I don't know why he wouldn't go out and play well. And I think that if you were in a situation this week where you picked up a player, let's say like Baker Mayfield, with the weather being what it is and expecting the Browns to run the ball so much, why don't you just take a chance on Tua? So I think that's our big message today. Take a chance on Tua. He's an exciting player. Okay.
It's like an ABBA song.
There it is. Take a chance on me. Right from The Office. I saw it. Listen. All right. Now coming up next. If your lineups got more holes in it than the plot to Phantom Menace, like how does Darth Vader not recognize C-3PO? He built the machine. Like C-3PO has his memory board wiped out. Not Darth Vader. But anyways, the pod race was kind of dope. Anyways, our top starters and super sleepers are coming up next here on NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. And there he is, Phillip Rivers, playing inside. You know, had kind of high hopes. I actually had to pick up T.Y. Hilton today. That's where my life is. Picking up T.Y. Hilton for this run-heavy team. The Lions have given up, what, the fourth most fantasy points to running backs, and I'm picking up their top receiver. Anyways, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day, presented by Geico. I'm sitting here grousing about my lineup because I didn't think far enough ahead to worry about the bye weeks. But let's run through some of the top questions we have at the running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. Put some players up against each other and see who is going to come out victorious. It's kind of like fantasy Highlander. There can be only one. Let's start with the running back position. Darrell Henderson or DeAndre Swift? Kimmy.
I'm going to rock with Henderson on this one. Oh, I like this music. Oh.
Leonard
okay.
Fournette.
I'm gonna rock with Henderson because the Dolphins have allowed 2 top 5 fantasy running backs in the last 4 games.
Leonard Fournette or Rojo versus the Giants on Monday? Marcus.
I'm going to go with Ronald Jones in this one. I still think he's the lead running back regardless of what happens with Fournette. And speaking of Highlander, RIP Sean Connery.
Thank you. I watched The Rock last night in homage. Myles Gaskin versus the Rams or Melvin Gordon versus the Chargers. Kimmy, who do you got?
Ooh, I'm going to rock with Myles Gaskin on this one because he has the 5th most receptions a game this season amongst all fantasy running backs. So he can get involved in that passing game as well. So hit up Myles Gaskin.
David Montgomery versus the Saints or Devin Singletary against the Patriots. Marcus.
I think I'm going to go with Devin Singletary here. I think he unlocks the end zone, which has always been the key to his success. If he gets in the end zone, he's having a good day.
All right, let's move to the wide receiver position. Kyler Boyd against the Titans or Justin Jefferson against the Packers. Kimmy.
This is a really good one, but I'm going to swing with Tyler Boyd on this one. We were hyping Joe Burrow earlier. That still stands. Also, the Titans are allowing the 4th most fantasy points to wide receiver.
T. Higgins is going up against the Titans. Brandon Ayuk going up against the Seattle Seahawks. Marcus, who are you taking?
I'm going to lean slightly toward T. Higgins in this one. I think the 49ers run the football quite a bit. I think the Bengals are going to have to throw more, so I'm going to give Higgins the nod.
Bobby Trees at Miami. Marquise Hollywood Brown versus the Steelers. Kimmy, who do you got?
I know Marcus said that Marquise Hollywood Brown could be involved in the passing game finally, but I'm going to go with Bobby Trees. He's more consistent. Marquise Hollywood Brown just hasn't been fantasy relevant for me this season, so I don't expect it today against a tough matchup.
Jarvis Landry is going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Cooper Kupp on the road in Miami. Marcus, who are you starting?
I'm going Jarvis Landry. I think even with the wins being what they are in Cleveland, the short passing game's still in effect, and that's where Landry succeeds.
Let's move to the tight end position. Rob Gronkowski going up against the Giants, where we have TJ Hawkinson versus the Colts. Kimmy?
Homer pick, TJ Hawkinson, but also it's not even a homer pick because I know Gronk has gotten into the end zone, but speaking of the end zone, TJ Hawkinson has 4 receiving touchdowns this season. That's tied for 5th most amongst all tight ends. So Hawkinson all the way.
Overruled. Robert Tonyan. No, I'm kidding. Robert Tonyan versus the Vikings or Jonnu Smith versus the Bengals. Marcus, who you got?
I know you're going to overrule me on this one, but I'm going to say Jonnu because he's having a great season. He's a big part of the Titans passing game. The Bengals struggle against tight ends, so I'm going to go Jonnu here.
All right, Richard Rodgers with Dallas Goedert returning against the Dallas Cowboys or Hunter Henry versus the Broncos. Kimmy?
Hunter Henry. He's had double-digit fantasy points, I think, in 4 out of 6 games this season. So Hunter Henry for me.
All right, Marcus. Revenge. Jimmy Graham versus the Saints. Harrison Bryant going up against the Las Vegas Raiders.
I'm going to take Jimmy Graham here. I think the Saints are going to struggle against the tight end position. Plus, starting Bryant just feels like chasing the points after last week.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you don't want the Bengals. They've given up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends this season. All right, that was fun. Great job. One and all. Only one misstep, and I'll let you figure out which it was. Anyways, but it's time now for fantasy insurance presented by Geico. There are 4 teams on a bye. Obviously, the Arizona Cardinals, the Jags, the Texans, and the Washington FT. There's also plenty of injuries that are going around, too. So we need some players that anybody can go out right now, add off the waiver wire, and start them. Kimmy, who is going to be that player?
Okay, Marcus, you're going to like this one because I'm going to hype up a San Francisco 49er. I'm going to go a little bit deeper and pull out the name out of the bag. It's JaMycal Hasty. It's a really fun divisional game going up against the Seattle Seahawks. This is one that should be pretty interesting. Now, the reason that I like Hasty is because, speaking of injuries, there's a lot of injuries at the running back position for the 49ers. Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. Tevin Coleman is activated, so he is expected to play today. But regardless, I do see Hasty getting some opportunities. Now, he only put up 8 fantasy points in Week 7 against the New England Patriots, but he still had flashes of, holy cow, this guy could be fantasy relevant. He had 10 touches, whereas Jerick McKinnon only had 3, and he also had 9 rushes in Week 7. So I understand that Tevin Coleman is going to come back, but I think Hasty could be a deep pick and a guy who could produce today.
I'm going to go with another running back. I'm going to go Malcolm Brown here, who's available in about 78% of NFL.com leagues. Yeah, I know. He's not available in your league. I get it. But for everybody else, there's a good chance he's out there on the waiver wire for you. The Dolphins have given up the 7th most fantasy points per game to the running back position, or actually the 8th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Either way, they're getting carved up by fantasy running backs. That's my point here. The Rams run the football a lot. We've seen Malcolm Brown get quite a few touches, so I think if you need some help with the position, Malcolm Brown's out there for you.
Yeah, that's a great pickup. I had to drop him because I had no receivers on my bench, and I had to go pick up Scotty Miller this morning because I needed a receiver. I couldn't have any of those excess running backs. But this is a pretty good option going up against the Giants, who've allowed a top 25 fantasy wide receiver in 4 of their last 5 games. He had 9 targets, 6 receptions, 109 yards, and a touchdown last week against the Las Vegas Raiders. Understandable. That could be point chasing because of that. But with Chris Godwin out this week, I feel a little bit more comfortable with it. And one thing to note, too, about Scotty Miller, he has scored 19 fantasy points in 2 of his 4 games. He's scored less than 2 in the other 2 contests. So as long as he breaks that 3-point threshold, then he's an automatic for 19 fantasy points. And that was Fantasy Insurance presented by Geico. Coming up, is the Ezekiel Elliott situation so bad you're thinking about benching him? Well, snap out of it because you're not benching him. Anyways, we will tackle all of Week 8's burning questions next. And you're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. James Conner getting ready for a pivotal game against the Baltimore Ravens this week. The Steelers remain undefeated on the season, so this is a huge matchup. And of course, though, speaking of matchups, this is a tough one for James Conner. The Ravens have been tough against opposing running backs. And of course, welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Be sure that you have downloaded the all-new NFL Fantasy app, because not only is it the best fantasy app for your fantasy football league, you can also watch games on it. That's right. I'm going to be sitting here. I've got like multiple TVs. I got my computer working. I will have my phone showing live local games. It's really one of the best. Like, honestly, like even like people who don't play fantasy, like use this app because you can watch the local game. How do people not understand that? But anyways, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. Let's go now to some burning questions. Oh my God, there we are. That was weird. That was some sort of matrixy type of thing. But let's go through some of the Week 8 burning questions. And we talked about Ezekiel Elliott at the end of the last segment. Who scores more points today? Is it Ezekiel Elliott or is it Boston Scott? Marcus, why don't you lead us off?
I'm going to go Boston Scott. And I know the knee-jerk reaction is, look, Zeke is Zeke, and you took him probably with a top 4 or 5 pick, and you got to believe at some point they're going to lean on him. And maybe you do, but at some point you also look at that Cowboys offense and see that it is an absolute mess. The O-line is bad. They're on their third quarterback, starting a rookie this week against the Philadelphia Eagles. Meanwhile, Boston Scott has the luxury of playing against that bad Cowboy defense. So I know, your heart might say that to put Zeke back in there because he is Ezekiel Elliott, but my head says I'm going to go with Boston Scott.
Marcus, you're a man after my own heart because I completely agree. It's funny. We got a ton of questions on social media this weekend talking about, should I start Boston Scott or Travis Fulgham in the flex? I do think that Carson Wentz is going to throw the ball, but I also do think this is going to be a very run-heavy matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys. You already stated all the reason why it's smart to start Boston Scott against that abysmal Cowboys defense. So because of that reason, I am Boston Scott all the way. Cowboys fans, do not at me on this one. I'm sorry.
You know what? I am ignoring the advice of my boss, Rick Savage, and I'm leaning on the desk because I'm disappointed in both of you because I do not want these people showing up later tonight, Monday morning, being like, thanks for telling me to sit Zeke. I understand. There's a lot of reasons why you're going to sit Ezekiel Elliott. I just can't do it. I have to get him back into the lineup. The Cowboys' offensive line has looked atrocious. Ben DiNucci sounds like a character from Goodfellas. I get all of that. The thing is, I know I'm putting a lot of faith in Mike McCarthy, and perhaps I shouldn't. But Ezekiel Elliott is the pivotal player in this offense. They have to get him the ball. If it's not running it, it's out as a receiver out of the backfield. And they've got to be creative, and they've got to do it. And again, this comes down to Mike McCarthy, and maybe this will be me hoist on my own petard, sitting here in a Mike Singletary sweatshirt, talking about Mike McCarthy. Maybe that'll change the universe. I don't know. I got to start Ezekiel Elliott. And so when you guys are upset, go to those two. Don't go to me. Go to them. Anyways, what about another big one? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell. What do we do with this situation? Kimmy, why don't you lead us off here?
Okay, so lots of questions again on social media about this one. We all know, look, I'm repping my Kansas City sweatshirt. This is hard for me because my allegiance is just with the Chiefs. But I'm rocking with Clyde Edwards-Helaire because, guys, he is still the lead back in that offense. Yes, it's a revenge game for Le'Veon Bell. I think you should start Le'Veon Bell if you have Le'Veon Bell. But if we're talking about who is going to score more points, it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire going up against the Jets. The Jets have allowed 100-plus scrimmage yards or a touchdown to running backs in every single game this season. They've also allowed a top 7 fantasy running back in 3 of the last 4 games. Now, a big question was, how petty does Andy Reid want to be? Is he going to completely just let Le'Veon Bell run all over the Jets? And that may be the case, but I really do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to continue to be the lead back and get all of the opportunities, especially in the end zone.
I completely agree. I think CEH is going to be the lead back here in Kansas City for the Chiefs this week. But I do think Lev Bell does have a place. Now, I would say if you're picking between the two, start Edwards-Helaire. But I could certainly see a situation where Andy Reid does have a little bit of a petty party in the fourth quarter, like in garbage time, and they just let Lev run the ball as many times as possible to get some get back on the Jets. So that is certainly a possibility, and Le'Veon Bell is worth starting as a flex guy. But like I said, if you are having to choose between the two, then I think CEH is the guy you want.
Yeah, I could see that late in the game. The Jets go for it on fourth down, like deep in Chiefs territory, don't get it, and then they hand the ball off to Le'Veon Bell 16 consecutive times as he gets 70 yards and a touchdown. So I think the official position of NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico is start, CEH, flex, Le'Veon Bell. That is our official position here on November 1st. All right, up next, it's Sunday Fun Day! There it is. We're serving up our top starts of the week with an extra helping of pancakes and maple syrup. Did you hear Gronk talking about maple syrup this week? He loves maple syrup like I love the movie San Andreas. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. What's up, Lefty? There he is, Tua Tagovailoa taking the field for his first start for the Miami Dolphins. Oh, look at Ryan Fitzpatrick running alongside of him. I wonder what's going through Fitzpatrick's mind right there. He's like, oh, it would be a shame if you tripped. No, he looks like he's doing well. I don't know. All right, time now for 15 minutes to kick off, presented by Geico. Here are the notable actives and inactives for today. The big one, Dalvin Cook is going to be playing against the Green Bay Packers in a game we anticipate him running the ball an awful lot. Allen Robinson cleared to play against the Saints. That is great news. Some notable inactives, Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, 3 running backs that were drafted in the first 2 or 3 rounds, not going to be playing today. Michael Thomas, probably the first wide receiver off the board, not going to be playing today. We don't anticipate Chris Godwin playing this weekend either. I think he might already be ruled out, but don't anticipate Chris Godwin being out. So we are going to help you make some of those last minute decisions. And that was 15 minutes to kickoff, presented by Geico. I am Adam Rank alongside Kimmy Chex, Marcus Grant, and Florio. You know what? I have children, so I'm used to being disappointed. And Michael Florio is not wearing a floral shirt today, and that's fine. Listen, you give great fantasy advice. You make up for it in that way. And I know you were there all morning answering a plethora of questions. What was your most asked about question, Michael?
The most asked about question that I got was why I was not in a floral shirt.
Good.
But player-wise, it was Justin Jefferson. A lot of people are wondering what to do with him against the Packers. Tough secondary. Some wide receivers I said I would play over Jefferson were Travis Fulgham, Adam Thielen, Tyler Boyd, and then some others that I said I would play Jefferson over Marquise Brown, Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, Devontae Parker. So a lot of questions about Jefferson going up against that Green Bay secondary.
Do we know who Jair Alexander is going to shadow today, or does that float around?
I am expecting him to kind of, whichever one is out wide between Thielen and Jefferson at that moment for him to be shadowing that player. But I think both could see a good amount of him today.
Yeah, that's the one thing. He's been shutting down wide receivers, and that's something that we'll be exploring moving forward. But we do have some other fan questions, too. If we could roll those through. And Michael, I will give you the first one here. Claypool or Sterling Shepard in a PPR league? John needs a win badly. Who are you going with?
That's a tough one. I'm going to go with Sterling Shepard there of the two. Claypool, he had that one fantastic week, but outside of that, hasn't really had a whole lot of production. He's much more boom or bust, and it's bad weather there. Whereas with Sterling Shepard, he is what he kind of is. It's a safer floor, I think. I don't think the ceiling is as high as Claypool, but I think you'll get some safe points out of him.
Mark Andrews versus the Steelers or Mike Gesicki in Tua's first game. Noah wants to know, Marcus, who you got?
I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki here in this one. I think it's a good matchup for Gesicki against the Rams there. And I know that the narrative about young quarterbacks and tight ends might not be exactly true, but I do think in this situation, Gesicki's a good target for Tua.
All right, next question coming in from Scott. Justin Jackson or Malcolm Brown, half-point PPR. Kimmy, who are you starting?
Oh, God. Always confusing on these ones. But I'm going to do Justin Jackson. I know ranking your stardom, sit-em. I was watching in the NFL Fantasy app. You said, I don't know what to do with these guys, but I'm going to rock with Justin Jackson this Sunday.
All right, next question. And Deontay or LaMarcus P. Oh, my gosh. I really like LaMarcus Pirine today. And I know that this might end up being something that costs me, but I think that he's got a pretty good opportunity for the Jets, and I think that he's on the cusp of breaking out. I know that Frank Gore was on the injury report earlier this week, so I think he's got a good opportunity. So that's who I'm going to go with. But you know what? You know what time it is right now? It is Sunday Fun Day! Marcus, who's going to pop off today?
Devontae Adams is. The matchup is just, it's too good. He went for, $150, I think it was, against the Vikings in week 1, had a couple of touchdowns in that one. I said earlier in the week, my hot take earlier in the week was that he puts up a 50 burger. I think the wind might keep that down, so I'll give him another 40 burger against the Vikings, because as you mentioned, it's sort of like you talked about how all the other receivers disappear. It's sort of like Smurfette, right? Like before Smurfette came, there were a whole lot of other girl Smurfs in the village. Then Smurfette came, and she was the only one for a long time, and that's sort of what Devontae Adams is to the rest of the Packers pass catchers.
Yeah, Marcus, I'm going with someone in that game as well. I'm going with Dalvin Cook, though. He is an elite running back, and he is an elite matchup now against the Packers, who allow the most fantasy points, a ton of yards, a lot of touchdowns to running backs. I think Dalvin Cook absolutely goes off today.
Dalvin Cook, big things expected. Also big things expected for my homie, Patrick Mahomes, going up against the Jets. He's had 2+ passing touchdowns in 6 of 7 games this season. He's also put up over 20 fantasy points in 6 of 7 games this season. I think we're finally in store for one of those monster Patrick Mahomes game where he puts up like a 40 burger. So Patrick Mahomes, Sunday top scorer.
I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers, who is averaging close to 23 fantasy points this season. That would make him the QB7. The Vikings have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the 3rd most to wide receivers, which you would expect. So with Devontae Adams back, I expect this to be a big-time game. The weather, to me, is not going to be a factor anytime it's the Green Bay Packers. I think Aaron Rodgers has proven over the course of his career that he's fine. All right, what about star players we are worried about? Florio, who's one star that you're like, I don't know about starting him?
Yeah, I heard you guys talking about him earlier. It's Ezekiel, Elliott, and Rank. I love the Ben DiNucci sounds like a Goodfellas character, because that is my favorite movie, and it really does. But he scares me. The offensive line scares me. The matchup scares me. The Eagles have been really, really tough against the run, and you can get them through the passing game. I'm not sure if Ben DiNucci can get them through the passing game. And on top of that, though, you have to worry about the fumbles with Zeke right now. It's just the arrow is heavily pointing down for Zeke in this Cowboys offense.
I agree, Florio. Ezekiel Elliott, he does not have a 100-plus rushing yard game this entire season. But beyond just Zeke, I'm worried about the entire Cowboys offense. Like, what's going on? Every single Dallas Cowboy wide receiver has ranked outside of the top 25 in Week 7 when they played the Washington football team. Again, Ben DiNucci starting at quarterback. I really think I am going to fade every single Cowboy player and just see how this game ends up playing out. But Cowboys not looking so good in real football and fantasy football as well.
I'm worried about Mark Andrews this week in that tough matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, I said repeatedly this week that if the Ravens have any success throwing the football, it's going to be downfield to Hollywood Brown. The Steelers don't do much. They don't give up much to the tight end position, so I'm worried about some of those shorter underneath throws to Andrews.
And I'm going to go back to Adam Thielen just to give you a little bit of context to what Jair Alexander has done to some wide receivers this season. Calvin Ridley was held to 0 catches and 0 yards. Mike Evans, 1 target, 0 catches, 0 yards. Will Fuller, 1 target, 0 catches, 0 yards. I'm starting Adam Thielen. I'm just letting you know I'm very concerned about it. Hopefully he comes through in garbage time or something like that. What about must-start running backs for Week 8? Kimmy, why don't you lead us off here?
Okay, this one's a little spicy because I've been on the Rojo train all season long, and by no means am I saying do not start Ronald Jones. But I actually like Leonard Fournette. Let me talk. I actually really do like starting Leonard Fournette this week. They're going up and playing the New York Giants, and this could be finally a game where Leonard Fournette shows the reason why he joined the Buccaneers. I do think that they're going to use Jones as their early down back with Fournette handling the receiving duties. So because of that, Tom Brady is going to want to throw the ball. I think they're going to lead the Giants, so I think they're going to throw the ball early, and then they'll kind of run the ball later on in the game. So I think with Leonard Fournette being involved in the passing game, he is a solid start this week.
I think he's a good start. I also think Darrell Henderson is a very good start this week. And by any objective measure, he has been the most efficient and effective of the Rams running backs. And I think Sean McVay has finally clued into that because he's led the team in running back snaps the last 3 weeks. I do think we'll see some Malcolm Brown sprinkled in here as well, but it's a good matchup. I've been saying it all morning that it's a good matchup for the Rams to run the football against this Dolphins defense. So Henderson is a good start.
I think Jonathan Taylor's a really good start this week against a Lions team that is allowed in the top 6 in yards and fantasy points, allowed 2 running backs, and the opportunity had already been there for Taylor. He has 35% of the Colts touches this season, but I think coming off the bye, they're going to really try to get the rookie involved in the offense and just set him free. I like Jonathan Taylor this week, and I like him moving forward the rest of the season.
Yeah, I love that call, Florio. And some other running backs I really like this week. I like Myles Gaskin. I like Giovanni Bernard. But I want to circle back to Boston Scott because I know I said earlier we were talking about Ezekiel Elliott and Boston Scott, and I was campaigning for Ezekiel Elliott. I do want to point out, though, that Boston Scott scored close to 19 fantasy points last week against the Giants. The Cowboys have allowed the 9th most fantasy points to running backs this season. They've allowed the 2nd most rushing yards. So I feel like he's a very safe option. So I wanted to make sure that I reiterated that. Let's move on to the wide receiver position, though. Marcus, who is a wide receiver who you would say is a must-start?
Travis Fulgham, who has been pretty great for the Eagles for the last few weeks. He has legitimately taken over as the number one wide receiver, at least, in the passing game there for Philadelphia. And look, I could go on this long explanation about who he's playing and the stat. Look, it's the Cowboys, right? We've been watching this for the last few weeks. The Cowboy defense is bad. You pick on bad defenses. This is a bad defense. Start Travis Fulgham.
Marcus, I'm going with someone on your team. I'm going with Brandon Ayuk of the 49ers. He's someone I've picked up and am starting in a lot of leagues. He's coming off one of his best games of the year with over 100 yards. There's no Deebo Samuel this week, which could lead to even more targets for him. And it is the best matchup for receivers. The Seahawks allow by far the most fantasy points and yards to wide receivers each week.
All right, I was just talking about Leonard Fournette, but let's talk about the receivers on that team. I'm going to rock with Mike Evans this week because he should see an increased target share without Chris Godwin. He's dealing with a finger injury and won't be playing in Week 8. Now, Evans has averaged 9 targets per game in the 3 starts without a healthy Chris Godwin and has delivered wide receiver 2 or even better numbers in those contests without him. So Mike Evans is a must-start for me.
Yeah, I'm with you with Mike Evans, and I want to go back to a point that Florio was making about Justin Jefferson. I feel really confident in this one. I know that Starting Kirk Cousins always brings a lot of hesitation, but I think that Justin Jefferson is going to get an opportunity to show himself here. I don't know that I hope that they'll get the garbage time opportunities that he didn't get in week 1 against the Packers, but I think Justin Jefferson is a safe enough start this week. And as we look ahead to Monday, Tuesday, who are some of the players that we think we're going to be talking about an awful lot, like on Monday's NFL Fantasy Live and on the NFL Fantasy Football Show? Who are going to be some of the hot names? Florio, who do you got?
This one is going deep, but I think DJ Dallas, you look at the Seattle Seahawks running backs right now. Carson is dealing with an injury. You have Hyde with a hamstring. Travis Homer's dealing with a knee injury. They're just so banged up that he might actually have to start and get a lot of volume this week.
All right, I'm also going to dig deep on this one. I'm going to say it's going to be Rashard Higgins. We know that Odell Beckham Jr. is out for the season with that torn ACL. Rashard Higgins steps up in his place. He's had a receiving touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games. I understand weather could be a factor, but I want to rock with him and see what he can do and see him be the talk of the town.
I'm going to go with Drew Lock, and I think he's got some sleeper potential against this Chargers secondary today. They have given up some fantasy points to quarterbacks, and this is easily his best matchup. He's had a tough schedule to start the season, so I think he's going to kind of open some eyes this week, and everybody's going to realize he's got the Falcons on the schedule next week, so Drew Lock's going to become really popular, I think, on a lot of waiver wires.
Yeah, I started looking at him as a sleeper this week, but also I think the obvious answer here is Tua Tagovailoa. No matter what happens this week, he is going to be the most talked about player. Either he comes out and he puts up 40 fantasy points, or on the other end of the spectrum, we're going to be one of those guys that we talk about like, oh, why did they bench Ryan Fitzpatrick or anything like that? So I think that'll be he'll be all over the rundowns moving forward. And what do we got? We got Stephon Diggs hanging out, dancing. Hopefully you'll have this feeling about your fantasy team as they come through for you this week. And I want to thank you for joining us here today. Be sure to watch NFL Fantasy Live on the NFL Network tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, the NFL Fantasy Football Show will be on here right on the all-new NFL Fantasy app. This is NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico.